Okay, my project deals with figurative language processing, and here we need to ask a question: why studying figurative language is incredibly important? That is because figurative language comprises a predominant part of our everyday speech. So there is an implicit rule to speak figuratively unless there is some kind of restriction not to do that. And moreover, we know for sure there is a big number of data supporting this hypothesis that this idea that concrete words and sentences which denote actions elicit activation of motor and premotor cortices in a somatotopic way. But at the same time, there is no unanimous decision on whether the abstract language, which is connected with some kind of abstract concept, elicits the same activation as well. The data is still inconclusive. That is why our study states the aims. The first one is to trace the differences in motor cortical excitation, which is inflicted by sentences of different types. The second one is just to analyze the influence of the concept on sentence processing, and also we would like to see the differences in the patterns of activations elicited by idiomatic and metaphoric sentences. On the right here we see motor potentials elicited by different sentence types. Here we need to speak first of all about the distinction between idiomatic and metaphoric meaning, because sometimes in some cases it is very difficult to draw a clear distinction, and that is why modern science suggests to place them somewhere on the conventionalization continuum, which goes from fully conventional to not conventional at all, where we have our everyday sentences with literal meanings that we construct. And the hypothesis is to place idiomatic sentences closer to fully conventionalized pole and the metaphors to less conventionalized corner of this continuum. Why so? Because idiom, it is a unique non-compositional meaning which is steady, which is frozen, and it needs to be learned and shared by all the members of the community to be used effectively and to be understood. So idioms can be only slightly modified but not changed by the context, by use. At the same time, metaphors are not only a stylistic device used for enriching our speech, but also a cognitive mechanism. And this mechanism is really important according to George Lakoff, who created the theory of cognitive metaphor. Cognitive metaphors allow us to learn and to perceive the part of the world that we cannot perceive directly, so it is highly abstract concepts and notions. To test our hypothesis, we created the procedure. You may see it here. So we had sentences presented in three parts. The first one is the notion part, then the verbal component of the sentence, and then the rest of the sentence. Each of them was presented for 500 milliseconds. And we had TMS implied in two different time locations. So the first one is on the second segment of the sentence, on the verbal component, and we regard it as a limited context because in that case it was difficult to understand the use of the verb in the context. And in the second condition, when the full sentence was presented, we regard it as disambiguating context, and here we may clearly distinguish between the types of the sentences. And also there was a semantic decision task, so the word adjective was presented after each sentence, and the task was to distinguish whether the meaning of this adjective is compatible with the meaning of the preceding sentence. This part took 3,000 milliseconds, and during all this time, motor potentials were recorded. So stimuli comprised of 160 sentences. Each of these groups of sentences consists of literal, metaphoric, idiomatic, and abstract sentences, and in the three groups, that were groups of interest, we also divided sentences into hand-related, conditional, unrelated condition. Abstract sentences were used as a control condition, and the subject of stimuli sentences in the sentences of interest, that is literal, metaphoric, and idiomatic conditions, were animates. They were expressed by the pronouns he or she, and in the abstract condition they were just entities, for example, a bank, a company, something like that. The verb in the sentences of interest was active, and in control condition it was state quote, and all of the sentences were matched in the length, letters and syllables, and also in the level of readability and associated. Here about the method. So we had 23 participants, native Russian speakers, enrolled in the experiment. You can see the characteristics in the right hand parentheses. And we used single pulse TMS to discover MEs, which were modulated by the meaning of the sentence. And also we recorded electromyography from the hand muscle. That was conditioned by the fact that the effectors of the sentences were hand effectors, and we placed the main electrode on the FDI muscle. The reference was placed on the joint of the index finger and the ground hemisphere. So we had two TMS sites, two timelines of stimulation, towards in the limited context, the second segment, and the broad context, the third segment. And MEPs were filtered online, then they were segmented between -20 and +20 milliseconds offline, and they also were referenced to 20 milliseconds per stimulus baseline. Then they were averaged and normalized on the control condition abstract sentences. Then we conducted 3x2 by 2x2 multiple comparison ANOVA because we had 4 vectors. So they were TMS condition, two levels, then 3 levels of sentence type, literal, idiomatic, metaphoric, and 2 hemispheres, and relationship, and also 2 levels. And here we may see that there is indeed an impact provided by the time location of TMS. Okay.
And voice.
Okay, yes. So TMS provided an impact on the process of the sentence types in the right hemisphere and in the left hemisphere, and in the right hemisphere the effect was more pronounced. Here we will speak about some effects. So we may see that literal and metaphoric sentences demonstrate similar patterns compared to idiomatic sentences, and we may refer that to be conditioned by the inherent properties of the stimuli. So as I said, idiomatic sentences are frozen, so they demand the process of semantic retrieval from the memory, and literal and metaphoric sentences, they need to be processed online because the meaning is compositional, it needs to be constructed, and it may be changed by the context every time. Also, the degree of motor component involvement in action and related sentences follows a decreasing trend, so you may see the highest activation for literal conditions, then it goes to metaphoric, and finally idiomatic. And we explain this finding by the amount of motor component preserved in the semantics of the verbs in each of the conditions. Also, the data demonstrate facilitation and hand-related semantic processing and interference for hand-unrelated ones in the left hemisphere, and the opposite trend can be seen in the right hemisphere. So here we may think about the influence that hand dominance provide on sentence processing. It was suggested in some of the studies that hand dominance is really influencing the perception and, of course, sentence processing. And also, left hemisphere and motor cortical areas appear to be more involved in the processing of hand action related sentences. And we conclude with the fact that sensory motor activation is really important, and it is present not only in literal sentence processing but also in figurative processes as well. And the degree of motor cortical excitability is determined by the context and the input of each hemisphere into the processes of sentence processing is different. So left hemisphere provides more syntactic processing, and that is why it facilitates more literal and metaphoric sentence processing, while right hemisphere is said to be more sensitive to semantics. That is why it plays a predominant role in processing of idiomatic sentences. And the inhibitory processes of idiomatic sentences related to hand actions in the left hemisphere can be explained by the fact that it needs this complex entity, which is idiom, needs the involvement of not only one hemisphere but processes and